Millionaire's card got declined. Then a poor little girl did the unimaginable. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and type HOPE in the comments. A beautiful piece of good news may come your way very soon. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Marcus Wellington adjusted his Italian silk tie as he walked through the automatic doors of Sunrise Market, his phone pressed against his ear. The call with the Tokyo investors had run longer than expected, and he needed to grab something quick for dinner before heading back to his penthouse. At 38, Marcus had built Wellington Industries into a financial empire worth $3 billion, but tonight he just wanted a simple meal without the pretense of boardroom dining. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he grabbed a basket, still discussing overseas acquisitions with his assistant Jennifer. "Tell them we'll counter at 42 million, not a penny more," he said, navigating through the produce section. His charcoal Tom Ford suit stood out among the casual evening shoppers, families with children, elderly couples comparing prices, teenagers buying energy drinks. He picked up organic salmon, truffle oil, and a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. The familiar weight of his platinum American Express card in his wallet gave him the same confidence it always had. Money had never been a problem for Marcus Wellington. It was the solution to every problem. The checkout lines were busy for a Tuesday evening. Marcus chose the shortest one, barely glancing at the cashier, a blonde woman who looked tired and stressed. Behind him, a growing line of customers checked their watches and phones impatiently. He continued his business call, discussing merger details, while absently watching the cashier scan items for the customer ahead of him. When his turn came, Marcus placed his items on the conveyor belt and handed over his card without breaking his phone conversation. "The Shanghai deal needs to close by Friday," he told Jennifer. "I don't care if you have to fly there yourself." The card reader beeped once, twice, then displayed a red, declined message. Marcus paused mid-sentence. "I'll call you back," he told Jennifer, pocketing his phone. He looked at the cashier's name tag, Claire Morrison, and noticed her exhausted blue eyes for the first time. There must be some mistake. Run it again. Claire swiped the card again, her movements sharp with barely concealed irritation. The machine beeped red again. "Sir, your card has been declined. Do you have another form of payment?" "That's impossible," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been told no by a financial institution. "That account has a 7-figure limit." "Well, it's declined now," Claire snapped, her patience worn thin after a 12-hour shift on her feet. "Maybe your bank put a hold on it for suspicious activity. Happens all the time with rich people who never check their statements." The line behind Marcus was growing restless. A middle-aged man tapped his foot loudly. A woman with 2 crying toddlers sighed dramatically. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed his bank's emergency line, stepping slightly aside, but still blocking the register. "This is Marcus Wellington," he said when the representative answered. "My platinum card was just declined at a grocery store. I need this resolved immediately." As Marcus argued with the bank representative, his voice growing more strained with each "please hold," Claire crossed her arms and glared at him, and her day had started with her landlord threatening eviction, continued with her car breaking down in the parking lot, and now this entitled billionaire was holding up her line like the world owed him something. "Sir, you need to move aside or pay for your items," Claire said loudly enough for the other customers to hear. "I have other people waiting." Marcus covered his phone. "I'm trying to resolve this. It'll just take a minute." "You said that 10 minutes ago," the man behind him complained. "Some of us have jobs to get back to." The small crowd murmured agreement. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks, a sensation he hadn't experienced since his childhood days when his father would embarrass him in public. He was Marcus Wellington, for God's sake. He owned buildings taller than most people would ever climb. He'd had dinner with 3 presidents and owned more cars than most people would drive in a lifetime. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside," Claire said firmly. "Next customer, please." Marcus held up one finger, still listening to the hold music. The bank representative finally returned. "Mr. Wellington, I see the issue. There's been a massive wire transfer from your account this afternoon. $43 million to an offshore account in the Caymans. Our fraud department automatically froze all your accounts pending investigation." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "I didn't authorize any wire transfer." "Sir, I can see it was initiated from your personal computer using your security credentials. We'll need you to come in tomorrow morning to file a fraud report and begin the investigation process. In the meantime, all your accounts remain frozen." The phone went dead. Marcus stared at the device, his mind racing. $43 million. Nearly everything he had in liquid assets. Gone. Claire watched the color drain from his face and felt a momentary pang of sympathy before remembering her own problems. "Sir, are you going to pay for these items or not?" Marcus looked at the organic salmon, the truffle oil, the expensive wine. In his wallet, he had maybe $60 in cash, money he rarely used anymore. The groceries totaled $137. Marcus began, then stopped. For the first time in his adult life, he truly couldn't afford something. "I need to make some calls." The customers behind him were getting louder in their complaints. Claire's manager, a thin man named Bob, approached the register with concern written across his face. "What's the problem here?" Bob asked. "This gentleman's card was declined, and he's been holding up the line for 15 minutes, Claire explained. Bob looked at Marcus, taking in the expensive suit and watch, clearly confused. "Sir, do you have any other form of payment?" Marcus was about to explain when a small voice piped up from somewhere near his elbow. "Please don't be mean to him." Everyone turned to look down at a small girl, maybe 7 years old, with tangled blonde hair and clothes that had seen better days. Her blue eyes were wide and earnest, and she was looking up at Claire with the kind of innocent concern that only children possess. "Sweetheart, where are your parents?" Bob asked gently. The little girl glanced around nervously. "I don't have any. But please, can't you let him have his food? I can wash the lunch dishes for all the workers in the back room. I know there's always a big pile after everyone eats. I'm really good at washing dishes, and I'm fast too. And if there's any leftover food from the deli that you were going to throw away, I can eat that for dinner instead of going back hungry." Claire's expression shifted as recognition dawned. "Wait, you're the little girl who comes by sometimes asking about leftover sandwiches from the deli counter?" Arya nodded earnestly. "Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Patricia in the deli is always nice to me. She showed me where you keep the lunch dishes when the workers are done eating. There's always so many, and I wash dishes real good at St. Catherine's." The entire checkout area fell silent. Even the crying toddlers seemed to pause. Marcus stared down at this tiny person who had just offered to work for his groceries while going without food herself. Claire's expression softened completely. "Honey, what's your name?" "Arya," the little girl said quietly. "I live at St. Catherine's, but they don't always have enough dinner for everyone, so sometimes I come here to ask if anyone has leftover groceries they don't want." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. This child, this tiny, underfed angel, was offering to sacrifice her own meal so he could eat his expensive salmon. He knelt down to Arya's eye level, ignoring his expensive suit touching the grocery store floor. "Arya," he said softly, "that's very kind of you, but you shouldn't have to wash dishes for my food." "It's okay," Arya said brightly. "I like washing dishes. Sister Maria taught me how to make them really clean, and you look sad. Sad people should still get to eat." Marcus looked up at Claire, whose eyes were now glistening with unshed tears. The impatient customers had grown quiet, many of them reaching for their wallets. "You know what?" Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your groceries are on the house tonight, sir. All of them." "Claire, you can't just keep them, sir. I'll pay for them myself," Claire interrupted. "Out of my tips." Marcus stood slowly, looking between Claire and the waiter. Something His phone buzzed with what he knew would be frantic calls from his lawyers, his accountants, his board members. But for the first time in years, none of that seemed to matter as much as the small hand that had slipped into his. 3 hours later, Marcus sat across from Aria at a corner booth in Mickey's diner, watching her devour a cheeseburger and fries with the enthusiasm of someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days. Claire sat beside them, her grocery store apron replaced with a faded sweater, looking as exhausted as she had behind the register. "So, you live at St. Catherine's?" Marcus asked gently, sipping his coffee. His phone had been buzzing non-stop, but he'd turned it face down after the 4th call from his board chairman. Aria nodded, wiping ketchup from her chin. "It's nice there. Sister Maria is really kind, and there are lots of other kids. But there's not always enough food for everyone, especially at the end of the month." Marcus felt his heart clench. "How long have you been there, Aria?" "Since I was 4, she said matter-of-factly, stealing a French fry. "My mommy went to heaven in a car accident, and I don't have any other family. Well, I might have a daddy somewhere, but Sister Maria says he never came looking for me." Claire reached over and smoothed Aria's tangled hair. "You have beautiful hair, sweetheart. Do you brush it every morning?" "Sometimes I forget," Aria admitted. "And we only have one brush for all the girls, so sometimes I have to wait in line." Marcus watched Claire's gentle interaction with Aria and realized he'd misjudged the cashier completely. Her earlier rudeness hadn't been about entitlement or meanness. She was dealing with her own struggles and had reached her breaking point, just like he had tonight. "Claire," Marcus said carefully, "I owe you an apology and an explanation." Claire looked up from braiding a small section of Aria's hair. "You don't owe me anything. I was horrible to you tonight. It's been a really difficult day. Want to talk about it?" Claire hesitated, glancing at Aria, who was now working on her chocolate shake. "I got an eviction notice this morning. I'm 3 months behind on rent, and my landlord is done being patient. I've been working double shifts at the market, but it's barely enough to cover groceries and utilities, let alone catch up on rent." She paused, her voice dropping low. "Then my car died in the road after my shift. I couldn't afford to call a tow truck. I was already stressed when you came through my line, and when your card got declined." She shrugged. "I guess I took out my frustration on you." "I'm sorry." Marcus nodded slowly. "My card was declined because someone embezzled $43 million from my accounts today. My bank froze, everything pending investigation." Claire's eyes widened. $43 million, that's more money than most people will see in 10 lifetimes, yes, but it represents almost everything I have in liquid assets, if I can't prove fraud and get it back. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. "Let's just say I might be shopping for a studio apartment soon." Aria looked up from her shake, chocolate mustache adorning her upper lip. "What's embezzled mean?" "It means someone stole his money, sweetie," Claire explained gently. "That's not nice," Aria said seriously. "Stealing is wrong. Sister Maria says when people steal, it's usually because they're scared or hungry, but that doesn't make it okay." Marcus smiled despite himself. "Sister Maria sounds very wise." "She is. She says everyone deserves kindness, even when they're having bad days." Aria looked pointedly between Marcus and Claire. "Like you two were having tonight." Claire laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her tired face. "When did you become so smart, little one?" "I watch people a lot," Aria said simply. When you don't have much to do except wait for dinner or bedtime, you notice things. Like how Mr. Marcus talks on his phone because he's lonely, not because he's mean. And how you were being sharp because you were scared, not because you don't like people. Says Marcus stared at this 7-year-old who had just psychoanalyzed him more accurately than his last 3 therapists combined. How did you know I was lonely? Arya tilted her head thoughtfully. Because you eat fancy food by yourself instead of sharing it with friends. And because when your phone kept ringing tonight, you looked annoyed instead of happy that people wanted to talk to you. Claire met Marcus's eyes across the table, and he saw understanding pass between them. They were both staring at a child who possessed wisdom far beyond her years, forged by circumstances no 7-year-old should have to endure. Arya, Marcus said slowly, how would you like to not worry about dinner anymore? Arya's eyes widened. What do you mean? Marcus looked at Claire, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. I mean, what if you didn't have to come to the grocery store hoping for leftover food? What if you had your own room, with your own brush for your beautiful hair and 3 meals a day? Like a family? Arya whispered, barely daring to hope. Exactly like a family. Arya was quiet for a long moment, processing this. But you don't even know me. What if I'm not good enough? What if I do something wrong? Marcus felt his throat tighten. Sweetheart, tonight you offered to wash dishes so I could eat when I was a complete stranger to you. You saw past my expensive clothes and rude behavior to the person underneath. If anyone's not good enough in this situation, it's me. Claire wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Marcus, that's a beautiful gesture, but adoption is complicated. There are background checks, home studies, legal processes. I know, Marcus said. But I also know that I've spent the last 15 years building a fortune and calling it a life. Tonight, a 7-year-old taught me the difference between the two. Arya slipped out of her side of the booth and climbed up beside Marcus, her small hand finding his much larger one. Would you really want me? Even if I sometimes forget to brush my hair and I talk too much and I'm scared of thunderstorms? Marcus squeezed her tiny hand gently, especially then. His phone buzzed again, and this time he answered it. Jennifer, I need you to clear my calendar for the next few days. Cancel the Singapore meeting, postpone the quarterly reviews, and reschedule everything non-essential. Marcus, the board is in crisis mode about the missing funds. You can't just disappear right now. Jennifer's voice carried through the speaker. I'm not disappearing. I'm finally appearing, Marcus said, looking at Arya's hopeful face. And Jennifer, I need you to research adoption procedures for children in state care, specifically through St. Catherine's Children's Home. There was a pause. Adoption procedures. Marcus, are you having some kind of breakdown? No, Marcus said, feeling more clear-headed than he had in years. I think I'm finally having a breakthrough. He ended the call and looked at Claire, who was watching the interaction with amazement. What about you, Claire? After tonight, are you going to be okay? Claire shrugged. I'll figure something out. I always do. Marcus pulled out his wallet and counted his remaining cash, $63. He handed it all to Claire. It's not much, but maybe it'll help with groceries until you figure out the rest. Marcus, I can't take your money. You might need it. I might, he agreed. But you need it more right now. Besides, he smiled at Arya, who was leaning against his arm, someone recently taught me that taking care of people is more important than taking care of yourself. Claire accepted the money with tears in her eyes. Thank you, both of you. As they prepared to leave the diner, Marcus realized that 12 hours ago, losing $43 million would have been the worst thing he could imagine. Now, as Arya slipped her hand into his and chatted about her favorite books and her friend Katie at St. Catherine's, He wondered if it might turn out to be the best thing that had ever happened to him. But first, he had to figure out who had stolen his fortune and why. Because despite tonight's revelations, Marcus Wellington hadn't built a business empire by being naive. Someone had targeted him specifically, and until he knew who and why, Aria wasn't safe. None of them were. The next morning, Marcus sat in the sterile conference room of First National Bank, surrounded by lawyers, investigators, and executives who looked like they'd been awake all night. His usual armor of expensive suits had been replaced with jeans and a button-down shirt, partly because he was trying to conserve his remaining cash, and partly because his priorities had fundamentally shifted in the last 18 hours. "Mr. Wellington," Detective Sarah Rodriguez said, sliding a thick folder across the mahogany table, "we've traced the wire transfer to an account in the Cayman Islands registered under a shell company called Meridian Holdings. The transaction was initiated from your personal computer using your login credentials at 3:47 p.m. yesterday." "Gee," Marcus frowned, trying to remember yesterday afternoon. "I was in meetings until 6. My computer was locked in my office." "Was anyone else in your office who would have access to your passwords?" Detective Rodriguez asked. "No one has my passwords except—" Marcus paused, his blood running cold, "except my assistant, Jennifer. But she's worked for me for 8 years. She's like family." "Mr. Wellington," the bank's fraud investigator, a thin man named Patterson, interrupted, "we need to discuss the timeline more carefully. The transfer wasn't just someone logging into your computer. It required a secondary authorization code that gets sent to your personal phone. Someone would need both your computer access and your phone to complete this transaction." Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through yesterday's messages. There it was. A text from First National at 3:47 p.m. with a 6-digit authorization code. "I remember getting this, but I was in a meeting with the board. I assumed it was just a routine security update. I get these codes all the time for various transactions." "Did you share that code with anyone?" Marcus stopped, a memory surfacing. "I was discussing the Shanghai acquisition with Jennifer. When the text came through, I was annoyed by the interruption. I might have. I think I read the number aloud while I was dictating notes to her." The room fell silent. Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. "Mr. Wellington, we're going to need Jennifer's personnel file, her financial records, and we'll need to search her workspace." 2 hours later, Marcus stood in Jennifer's empty office, watching investigators photograph her computer and file through her desk drawers. Jennifer had called in sick that morning. The first sick day she'd taken in 3 years. "Marcus?" Claire's voice came from behind him. He turned to see her standing in the doorway, holding Aria's hand. Both of them looked concerned. "Claire, what are you doing here?" Marcus asked, stepping away from the investigators. "Aria insisted we come check on you," Claire said. "She was worried when you didn't come back to St. Catherine's like you promised." Aria let go of Claire's hand and walked over to Marcus, studying his face with those unnaturally perceptive eyes. "You look scared. Did the people who stole your money hurt you?" Marcus knelt down to her level. "No, sweetheart. But I'm learning that someone I trusted very much might have been the one who stole it." "That's the worst kind of stealing," Aria said solemnly. "Sister Maria says when people we love hurt us, it breaks our hearts in a different way than when strangers hurt us." "Sister Maria is very smart," Marcus agreed, feeling that familiar tightness in his chest that seemed to happen whenever Aria demonstrated wisdom beyond her years. Claire approached cautiously. "Is there anything we can do to help?" Before Marcus could answer, Detective Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Wellington, we need to speak with you privately." Marcus looked at Claire and Aria. "Can you wait in my office? There are some books on the shelf that Aria might like." After they left, Detective Rodriguez closed the door. We found something interesting in Jennifer's desk. Travel brochures for Costa Rica and a resignation letter dated for next Friday. She was planning to quit right after you would have discovered the missing money. Marcus sank into Jennifer's chair, feeling betrayed in a way he hadn't since his father had sold his childhood home without telling him. 8 years. I trusted her with everything. There's more, Detective Rodriguez said grimly. We contacted her apartment building. She moved out 3 days ago, told the landlord she was relocating for a new job. Her neighbors haven't seen her since Monday. So she's gone. We've issued a BOLO alert and contacted Interpol. If she tries to access that Cayman account or cross any borders, we'll find her. But Mr. Wellington, I have to ask, even if we recover the money, it could take months or years. Do you have the resources to maintain your current lifestyle during the investigation? Marcus thought about his penthouse, with its astronomical monthly fees, his fleet of cars, his club memberships, his standing reservations at restaurants that cost more per meal than most people made in a week. Then he thought about Aria's excitement when he'd promised to take her shopping for a new brush and some books. Detective Rodriguez, I need to ask you something. If I wanted to adopt a child from St. Catherine's Children's Home, would this financial situation affect my eligibility? Detective Rodriguez looked surprised. Well, it would certainly complicate things. Social services requires proof of financial stability, background checks, home visits. If you're under investigation for financial fraud, even as the victim, I understand. Marcus stood up, his mind racing. How long before we know more about Jennifer's location? We should have preliminary reports by tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I'd recommend you speak with your attorney about protecting your remaining assets and perhaps finding temporary housing that's more economical. An hour later, Marcus sat in his office with Claire and Aria, watching the little girl flip through a book about horses, completely absorbed. Claire was studying his face with concern. The situation is worse than you thought, isn't it? Claire asked quietly. My assistant, the person I trusted most in the world besides my lawyers, embezzled the money and disappeared. Even if they recover it, the investigation could take years. And in the meantime, Marcus gestured around his office, I can't afford to maintain any of this. And what does that mean for Aria? Marcus looked at the little girl, who had fallen asleep curled up in the leather chair with the horsebook in her lap. Even in sleep, she looked fragile and vulnerable. It means I can't adopt her right now. No social worker is going to approve a single man under investigation for financial crimes, living on borrowed time in borrowed offices. Marcus felt his voice crack slightly. I made her a promise I can't keep. Claire was quiet for a moment, thinking, maybe you can't keep it the way you planned, but that doesn't mean you can't keep it at all. What do you mean? I mean, maybe the solution isn't for you to save her. Maybe it's for all of us to save each other. Marcus looked at Claire with new attention. I'm not sure I follow. You need a place to live that you can afford while this gets sorted out. I'm about to be evicted from my apartment, but I know a place. It's not fancy, but it's cheap and it's safe. Aria needs a stable home with people who love her. Claire paused, gathering courage. What if we did this together? Together? A partnership. You help me keep a roof over my head. I help you create the kind of stable home environment that social services would approve for Aria. We both make sure she gets the love and attention she deserves. Marcus stared at Claire, seeing her clearly for the first time. Not just as the stressed cashier from last night, but as a woman who was offering to completely restructure her life for a child she'd known for less than 24 hours. Her blonde hair caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through his office windows, and he noticed the way she unconsciously smoothed Aria's hair even while the child slept. There was something innately maternal about her, something gentle and fierce at the same time. Claire, you barely know us. Why would you want to get involved in this mess? Claire looked over at sleeping Arya, then back at Marcus. For the first time since he'd met her, she seemed to be choosing her words carefully, as if what she was about to say mattered more than anything she'd ever said before. "I was married once," she said quietly, "to a man who promised me the world and then disappeared when things got difficult. We were trying to have children for 3 years. I had 2 miscarriages, and each time he became more distant, more resentful, like my body failing was somehow a personal insult to him." She wiped away a tear that had escaped. "When he finally left, he said I was broken, that I'd never be able to give anyone the family they deserved. I believed him for a long time. I've been working double shifts and living in that tiny apartment, convinced that I wasn't worthy of love or family or anything good." Marcus felt his chest tighten as he watched this strong woman reveal her deepest pain. "Yesterday I was going home to an empty apartment to worry about bills I can't pay and a future I can't control. Today I'm sitting in a billionaire's office planning how to raise a 7-year-old together with a man who's shown me more kindness in one day than my ex-husband showed me in 5 years of marriage." Claire's voice grew stronger. "Maybe losing everything was exactly what all 3 of us needed to find what we were actually looking for." Marcus stood up and walked around his desk, kneeling beside Claire's chair. "Claire, what your ex-husband said to you, that was his failure, not yours. You're not broken. You're the woman who paid for a stranger's groceries when you could barely afford your own. You're the woman who's willing to restructure her entire life to help a child you just met. If anyone in this room is worthy of family, it's you." Claire's eyes filled with fresh tears. But these were different tears. These were tears of hope instead of pain. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, like a door opening that he hadn't even realized was closed. "Are you sure about this?" "No," Claire admitted with a smile. "But I haven't been sure about anything in my life for the last 5 years, and look where playing it safe got me. Maybe it's time to try something different." "Vijay, what about the practical aspects?" Marcus asked, his business mind kicking in despite the emotional weight of the moment. "Social services will investigate both of us. They'll want to see financial stability, character references, a suitable living environment. I know the apartment I mentioned isn't much," Claire said, "but it's a 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood. My friend Sarah lived there for 3 years before she moved in with her boyfriend. The rent is $800 a month, which I obviously can't afford alone, but split between us." "$800 total?" Marcus asked, amazed. His monthly parking fee for his corporate spot cost more than that. Total. It's not the penthouse you're used to, but there's a good elementary school 2 blocks away, a park across the street, and Mrs. Chen next door bakes cookies for all the kids in the building. Marcus tried to imagine himself in a modest apartment, sharing space, splitting grocery costs, living like a normal person instead of a corporate mogul. 3 days ago, the thought would have horrified him. Today, it sounded like exactly what he needed. "What about work?" Marcus asked. "I can manage my business remotely for a while, but you need your job at the grocery store." "Actually," Claire said with a small smile, "I gave Bob my notice this morning. After what happened with you last night, I realized I've been settling for a job that barely pays my bills and makes me miserable. I called the Seattle Children's Hospital this morning. I used to be a pediatric nurse before everything fell apart with my marriage. They said they'd love to interview me for a position in their outpatient clinic." Marcus stared at her with growing admiration. "You're a nurse, was a nurse." "I let my certification lapse after the divorce because I couldn't handle being around children when I thought I'd never have any of my own. But I can renew it. And the hospital said the job pays well enough that I could contribute equally to our household expenses." "Claire, you don't need to contribute equally to anything. I still have some resources, and once this investigation is resolved—" "Marcus," Claire interrupted gently, "if we're going to do this, if we're going to create a stable home for Arya, It needs to be a real partnership. I'm not looking for a rich man to rescue me. I'm looking for a co-parent who wants to rescue a little girl who deserves everything good in this world. Marcus looked at Arya, still sleeping peacefully, and made a decision that 3 days ago would have seemed impossible. Okay, let's do it together. As they shook hands, sealing their unusual partnership, Marcus noticed how perfectly Claire's hand fit in his. There was something electric about the contact, something that spoke to possibilities neither of them had voiced yet. "There's one more thing," Claire said softly, not letting go of his hand. "Marcus, I need you to know that I'm not just doing this for Arya. I'm doing it for all of us, because in the span of 24 hours, you've shown me what it looks like when someone chooses kindness over anger, when someone puts a child's needs before their own ego, when someone turns a crisis into an opportunity to build something beautiful." Marcus felt his breath catch. "Claire, I'm not saying I expect anything romantic between us," she continued quickly, color rising in her cheeks. "I just want you to know that I see who you really are underneath all the corporate armor, and I like what I see very much." Before Marcus could respond, Arya stirred in her chair, blinking sleepily. "Are we still talking about me getting a family?" she asked with a yawn. "Yes, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're talking about all three of us becoming a family." "Good," Arya said matter-of-factly, settling back into the chair. "Because I was dreaming about pancakes for breakfast and someone reading me bedtime stories, and I really want those dreams to come true." Claire laughed through her tears. "I make excellent pancakes. And I'm getting much better at reading bedtime stories," Marcus added. But as he moved to gather the legal documents they'd need for their partnership, Marcus caught a glimpse of movement outside his office window. A black sedan with tinted windows was parked across the street, and someone inside was taking photographs of the building with a telephoto lens. His instincts, honed by years of corporate warfare, told him that Jennifer's theft might not have been a simple crime of opportunity. "Claire," Marcus said quietly, moving away from the window, "we should probably leave soon. I want to get Arya somewhere safe before dark." "Is everything okay?" Claire asked, noting the tension in his voice. Marcus looked at this woman who had just bared her soul to him, at this child who had already been through too much trauma in her short life, and made another decision. He was going to protect them both, no matter what it cost him. "Everything's going to be fine," he said with more confidence than he felt. "But I think our problems are just beginning." The black sedan's engine started as Marcus began packing up his office, and he noticed it didn't leave until after they did. Someone was watching them, and Marcus had a feeling that Jennifer's theft was just the opening move in a much larger and more dangerous game. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in the cramped kitchen of Claire's small apartment, attempting to make pancakes, while Arya sat at the tiny table, coloring in a new book Claire had bought her. The domestic scene would have seemed impossible to him a month ago, but now it felt more natural than any boardroom meeting ever had. "Marcus, you're burning them again," Claire called from the bathroom, where she was getting ready for her morning shift at the grocery store. "I'm not burning them. I'm creating a rustic, caramelized texture," Marcus replied, scraping blackened batter from the pan. Arya looked up from her coloring book, giggling. "That's fancy talk for burned, isn't it?" "Smart girl," Marcus said, ruffling her hair. In the past 2 weeks, Arya had blossomed. Her hair was now clean and braided every morning. She had proper clothes that fit, and most importantly, she laughed constantly. The transformation was miraculous. Claire emerged from the bathroom, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing her grocery store uniform. Even in the simple blue polo shirt and khakis, she took Marcus's breath away. Somewhere between learning to navigate their tiny shared space and watching her gentle patience with Arya, he'd fallen completely in love with her. I called Sister Maria yesterday, Claire said, pouring coffee into her travel mug. She's thrilled about how well Aria is doing. The paperwork for the temporary guardianship is almost complete. Marcus flipped another pancake, this one only slightly charred. What about the home inspection next week? I think we'll be fine. Detective Rodriguez said the investigation is progressing well, and your lawyer thinks the character references from the bank executives will help offset the financial uncertainty. Marcus nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The black sedan had been parked outside their building 3 more times in the past week. When he'd approached it once, it had driven away before he could get close enough to see the license plate. "Daddy Marcus, is this coloring good?" Aria asked, holding up her book. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. She'd started calling him a few days ago, and each time it happened, he felt a mixture of joy and terror. Joy because it meant she felt safe with him. Terror because he still wasn't sure he deserved her trust. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, examining her careful work on a picture of a family having a picnic. She'd colored the father figure's hair dark brown like his, the mother's hair blonde like Claire's, and the little girl's hair the same golden shade as her own. Claire looked over Aria's shoulder and smiled. "We look like a real family in that picture." "We are a real family," Aria said matter-of-factly. "Real families take care of each other, and we take care of each other." Marcus's phone rang, interrupting the moment. Detective Rodriguez's name appeared on the screen. "Mr. Wellington, we have an update on your case. Can you come to the station this morning?" "Of course. Did you find Jennifer?" "We found something better. We found out who Jennifer was working for." 2 hours later, Marcus sat across from Detective Rodriguez in the same sterile conference room where this nightmare had begun. But now, Claire was beside him, having called in sick to work so she could provide moral support. Jennifer Blake, her real name, by the way, was hired by her assistant 8 years ago with false credentials. Detective Rodriguez began, sliding a manila folder across the table. Her real name is Jennifer Martinez, and she's been working for a corporate espionage firm based in Switzerland. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "Corporate espionage? You mean this wasn't just theft? The 43 million was just phase 1. Detective Rodriguez continued grimly. "We traced communications between Jennifer and her handlers. They've been slowly copying your client lists, trade secrets, acquisition strategies, and financial records for years. The theft was meant to trigger exactly what it did: force you to liquidate assets, destabilize your company, and create chaos in your personal life." Claire reached for Marcus's hand under the table. "But why? Who would want to destroy Marcus specifically?" Detective Rodriguez opened another file. "Ever hear of Blackstone International, Mr. Wellington?" Marcus's face went pale. "Richard Blackstone. We've been competing for the same contracts for 15 years, but corporate competition is one thing. This is industrial sabotage with intent to commit fraud." Detective Rodriguez finished. "Blackstone hired the Swiss firm to infiltrate your company and systematically destroy it from within. The goal was to bankrupt you, force Wellington Industries into liquidation, and then acquire your client base and assets for pennies on the dollar." Marcus stared at the photos in the file. Surveillance pictures of him from months ago, detailed financial records, even photos of his penthouse. "They've been watching me for years." "There's more," Detective Rodriguez said grimly. "We intercepted communications from yesterday. They know about your current living situation, they know about Aria, and they know about your adoption proceedings." Claire's grip on Marcus's hand tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means they view your newfound stability as a threat to their plan. If you successfully adopt Aria and demonstrate that you're rebuilding your life, it undermines their goal of destroying you completely." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Are you saying they might try to hurt her? I'm saying they've already tried. The car that's been following you isn't one of ours, Mr. Wellington. We've been conducting surveillance on you for your protection, but someone else has been conducting surveillance for less benign purposes. Claire stood up abruptly. We need to get Aria, right now. Marcus was already reaching for his phone. Mrs. Henderson, he said when Aria's babysitter answered. Is Aria okay? She's fine, Mr. Wellington. She's right here watching cartoons. Why? Don't let her out of your sight. We're coming home right now. Detective Rodriguez stood as well. We're placing all three of you in protective custody until we can arrest the surveillance team and neutralize the immediate threat. Protective custody? Marcus asked. For how long? However long it takes. But Mr. Wellington, I need you to understand, Blackstone has invested millions in this operation. They're not going to simply walk away because we discovered Jennifer. They're going to escalate. As they rushed back to the apartment, Marcus realized that saving Aria had become more complicated than he'd ever imagined. It wasn't just about providing her with a stable home anymore. It was about keeping her alive. The black sedan was parked across from their building again, but this time Marcus could see two figures inside. As their taxi pulled up, the sedan's engine started. They're following us, Claire whispered. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed 911. But as he started to speak to the dispatcher, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The apartment building's front door was standing wide open, and Mrs. Henderson was nowhere to be seen. Claire, Marcus said quietly. Something's wrong. Dove 5. Marcus took the apartment stairs 3 at a time, with Claire and 2 police officers right behind him. The hallway was eerily quiet, and their apartment door was ajar. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs as he pushed the door open slowly. Mrs. Henderson, he called out. Aria? The living room was empty, but Marcus could hear voices coming from the bedroom. He moved carefully down the short hallway, the police officers flanking him with their weapons drawn. I said sit down and be quiet, an unfamiliar male voice was saying. Your daddy will be here soon. Marcus peered around the corner and saw a scene that nearly brought him to his knees. Aria was sitting on the bed, tears streaming down her face, while Mrs. Henderson sat beside her, looking terrified. A tall man in a dark suit stood near the window with his back to the door, speaking into a phone. Yes, he just arrived. The girl is secure. Marcus felt Claire's hand on his shoulder, steadying him. One of the police officers motioned for them to step back, but Marcus couldn't move. Aria looked so small and frightened. Nothing like the brave little girl who had offered to wash dishes for a stranger just 2 weeks ago. The police officer whispered into his radio, calling for backup, then held up 3 fingers, counting down silently. 3, 2, 1. Police! Hands where we can see them! The man spun around, reaching inside his jacket, but the officers were faster. Within seconds he was on the ground in handcuffs, and Marcus was rushing to Aria. Daddy, Marcus! Ziddy, she cried, throwing herself into his arms. He said he was going to take me away. He said you didn't really want me. Marcus held her tightly, feeling her small body shake against his chest. Nobody is taking you anywhere, sweetheart. You're safe. I promise you're safe. Claire knelt beside them, wrapping both Marcus and Aria in her arms. Mrs. Henderson was shaking but unharmed. He just walked right in, Mrs. Henderson explained to the police officers. Said he was with social services here to check on Aria's placement, but something felt wrong, so I asked for identification. That's when he got aggressive and forced us into the bedroom. Detective Rodriguez arrived 20 minutes later, looking grim. The man we arrested is Hans Müller, a freelance operative with ties to the same Swiss firm that employed Jennifer Martinez. We found surveillance equipment in his car, along with detailed files on all 3 of you. Marcus was still holding Aria, who had finally stopped crying but refused to let go of his shirt. What was he planning to do you? Well, based on the communications we've intercepted, the plan was to kidnap Arya and use her as leverage to force you to sign over control of your remaining assets to Blackstone International. Detective Rodriguez explained. They figured that threatening a child or trying to adopt would be more effective than just financial pressure. Claire looked horrified. They were going to use a 7-year-old as bait in a corporate takeover? These people play for keeps, Ms. Morrison, which is why we're moving all 3 of you to a safe house tonight. No arguments. As they packed their few belongings, Arya stayed close to Marcus's side, her small hand clutched in his. She hadn't spoken much since the police arrested the intruder, and Marcus was worried about the psychological impact of the day's events. "Arya, sweetheart," Marcus said gently as they waited for the police escort to arrive. "Are you okay? You can talk to me about anything." Arya looked up at him with those wise blue eyes that seemed too old for her face. "Daddy Marcus, if the bad men want to hurt us because you're trying to adopt me, maybe I should go back to St. Catherine's. Then you and Mommy Claire would be safe." Marcus felt his heart shatter. This brave little girl was willing to sacrifice her own happiness to protect the people she loved. He knelt down to her eye level, taking her small hands in his. "Arya Elizabeth Peterson," he said, using her full name for the first time. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. No bad person in the world could ever make me stop wanting you as my daughter. Not for any amount of money, not for any threat, not for anything. Do you understand?" Arya's eyes filled with tears again. "But what if they hurt you? What if they hurt Mommy Claire?" Claire knelt down beside them. "Sweet girl, sometimes when people love each other, they have to be brave together. Your daddy Marcus and I are going to protect you, and we're going to let the police protect all of us. But we're staying together no matter what." "Like a real family?" Arya whispered. "Exactly like a real family," Marcus confirmed. "In fact, I have something to ask both of you." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Claire's eyes widened as he opened it to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I know this isn't the most romantic setting," Marcus said, looking at Claire, "and I know we haven't been together very long in the traditional sense. But these past 2 weeks have shown me what real love looks like. It's not about expensive dinners or fancy gestures. It's about choosing each other every day, about building something together that's stronger than what any of us could build alone." Claire covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. Marcus turned to Arya. "Arya, would it be okay with you if I asked Mommy Claire to marry me, so we could all be a real family forever?" Arya's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Yes, yes, ask her! Ask her right now!" Marcus looked back at Claire. "Claire Morrison, will you marry me? Will you help me give Arya the family she deserves? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that losing everything was actually how I found everything I ever really wanted?" Claire was crying so hard she could barely speak. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course, yes." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, and Arya clapped her hands in delight. For a moment, surrounded by packed boxes and police officers, they were just a family celebrating their engagement. But as they prepared to leave for the safe house, Detective Rodriguez pulled Marcus aside with troubling news. "Mr. Wellington, we intercepted another communication. Blackstone isn't giving up. In fact, they're accelerating their timeline. They're planning something big for tomorrow night." "What kind of something?" "We're not sure yet, but it involves the Wellington Industries board meeting scheduled for tomorrow evening. They know you'll be there, and they know Claire and Arya will be at the safe house. It seems like they're planning to make their final move." Marcus looked at his new fiancée and soon-to-be daughter, both of whom were depending on him to keep them safe. Tomorrow night, he would have to face Richard Blackstone and end this nightmare once and for all. But tonight, for the first time in years, Marcus Wellington knew exactly what he was fighting for. The Wellington Industries boardroom had never felt more like enemy territory than it did the following evening. Marcus sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, facing 12 board members whose expressions ranged from concerned to openly hostile. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Seattle skyline glittered in the darkness, but Marcus's attention was focused on the empty chair where Richard Blackstone would soon be sitting. The familiar weight of his wedding ring, a simple gold band that Claire had insisted on buying together, reminded him of what he was truly fighting for tonight. Just this morning, he'd helped Aria practice writing her new name, Aria Elizabeth Wellington. The memory of her concentrating so hard on each letter, tongue poking out in determination, gave him strength now. "Marcus, we need to discuss the company's future," said Robert Chen, the board chairman and Marcus's former mentor. Robert had been like a father figure to him when he'd first started Wellington Industries, but tonight his weathered face showed only concern and disappointment. The financial irregularities, the investigation, the negative press, it's affecting our stock price and client confidence. Our biggest clients are starting to ask questions about leadership stability. Marcus had anticipated this. He'd spent the afternoon reviewing the company's performance metrics, client retention rates, and financial projections. Despite everything that had happened in his personal life, Wellington Industries was still performing at record levels. "I understand your concerns, Robert," Marcus replied calmly, pulling out a folder of documents, "but I need you to understand that everything that's happened has been part of a coordinated attack on this company. Our third-quarter profits are up 18%, client satisfaction scores are at an all-time high, and we've closed more major deals in the past month than any comparable period in company history." Board member Patricia Williams, a sharp woman in her 50s who'd always been skeptical of Marcus's leadership style, leaned forward. "Financial performance aside, Marcus, you must see that your personal situation has become a liability. A CEO under investigation, living in protective custody, trying to adopt a child while unmarried. It's not the image our clients expect from Wellington Industries." Marcus felt anger rise in his chest, but then he remembered Claire's words from that morning. "They don't know who you really are now. They only see the old version of you. Show them the man I married." Before he could respond, the boardroom doors opened. Richard Blackstone walked in with his usual predatory confidence, followed by two men in expensive suits who Marcus recognized as his lawyers. Blackstone was exactly as Marcus remembered him, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of cold blue eyes that never showed genuine emotion. He wore a charcoal grey Armani suit that probably cost more than most people made in 3 months, and his smile had the calculating quality of a shark, sensing blood in the water. "Gentlemen, ladies," Blackstone said smoothly, taking the empty seat across from Marcus, "thank you for allowing me to attend tonight's meeting." Robert Chen looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his reading glasses. "Mr. Blackstone, while we appreciate your interest in investing in Wellington Industries, this is still an internal board meeting. We haven't actually voted to allow outside observers." Blackstone's smile widened, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. He recognized that expression. It was the same one Blackstone had worn 15 years ago when he'd successfully poached Marcus's 3 biggest clients in a single week. "Actually, Mr. Chen, I'm not here as a potential investor. I'm here as the new majority shareholder." The room fell silent. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice, but forced his expression to remain neutral. Years of high-stakes negotiations had taught him never to show weakness, especially not in front of Richard Blackstone. "What are you talking about?" Marcus demanded, his voice steady despite the panic rising in his chest. Blackstone's lawyer, a thin man with pale skin and rimless glasses, placed a thick document on the table. "This morning, Blackstone International acquired 51% of Wellington Industries stock through a combination of strategic purchases and proxy agreements with several shell companies. The transactions were completed before market open at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Marcus scanned the document, his lawyer training allowing him to quickly identify the key points. It was all legal, all technically above board, and completely devastating. Blackstone had been buying small blocks of Wellington Industries stock for months, using different shell companies to avoid triggering disclosure requirements. The artificial depression in the stock price caused by Marcus's recent troubles had made the shares cheap enough for Blackstone to afford a controlling interest. The stock purchases were made possible by the artificially depressed share price caused by your recent troubles. Blackstone continued with obvious satisfaction, leaning back in his chair like a cat that had cornered a mouse. Funny how personal scandals can affect business valuations, isn't it, Marcus? As majority shareholder, I'm calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in Marcus Wellington's leadership. Marcus watched the faces around the table as the board members processed this information. Some looked shocked, others looked relieved that someone was finally taking action. Patricia Williams was nodding slightly, as if she'd been expecting this moment. Furthermore, Blackstone continued, I'm prepared to offer very generous severance packages to any board members who vote to install new leadership. I have a complete restructuring plan that will streamline operations, cut unnecessary expenses, and refocus this company on profitable growth rather than... He looked directly at Marcus. Whatever charitable crusade our current CEO seems to be pursuing, board member after board member stared at the documentation in shock. Marcus realized that Blackstone had been planning this for years. The theft of his personal fortune was just the opening move in a much larger game. Every humiliation, every public embarrassment, every moment of vulnerability had been carefully orchestrated to bring the company's stock price down to a level where Blackstone could afford a takeover. Before we vote, Marcus said quietly, reaching into his briefcase, I have something to share with the board. He pulled out his phone and connected it to the boardroom sound system. Detective Rodriguez had given him permission to use the recordings tonight. But Marcus knew this was a significant gamble. If this didn't work, he would lose everything he'd built over the past 15 years. What you're about to hear, Marcus said, looking each board member in the eye, is a recorded conversation between Jennifer Martinez, my former assistant, and her handler at a Swiss corporate espionage firm. This recording was made by the FBI as part of their investigation into the theft of my personal assets. He pressed play, and Jennifer Martinez's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. The goal is to destroy Wellington completely. We've been copying his client files for 3 years, his acquisition strategies, his negotiation tactics, everything. Once Blackstone takes control of the company, we'll have eliminated the last major competitor in the Pacific Northwest market. The kidnapping threat against the kid was brilliant. It'll make Wellington look unstable and desperate, and it gives us leverage if he tries to fight the takeover. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Blackstone's confident expression faltered for the first time, a flush of color creeping up his neck. That's completely taken out of context, Blackstone said quickly. I have no knowledge of any espionage activities, and I certainly never authorized any threats against children. Marcus pressed play on another file. This time, it was Blackstone's own voice. I don't care what it takes, Richard. I want Wellington destroyed professionally and personally. If targeting the kid is what breaks him, then do it. Just make sure it can't be traced back to me. Patricia Williams gasped audibly. Robert Chen's face had gone pale. Even the lawyers looked uncomfortable. Marcus stood up slowly, feeling more confident than he had in weeks. Richard, did you really think I'd come here tonight without evidence? The FBI has recordings of your conversations with the Swiss firm, financial records of your payments to Jennifer Martinez, bank transfers totaling over $2 million to finance this operation, and testimony from Hans Müller about the planned kidnapping of my daughter. Your daughter? Blackstone sneered, but there was desperation in his voice now. She's not your daughter, Marcus. She's a charity case you picked up to make yourself look sympathetic. You can't even legally adopt her with your current financial situation. Marcus smiled for the first time all evening, and it was the kind of smile that had closed 1,000 deals and intimidated 100 competitors. Actually, Richard, I can. You see, while you were busy trying to destroy my company, something wonderful happened. I discovered what actually matters in life. He walked over to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline, where somewhere in a safe house, his wife and daughter were waiting for him to come home. 2 months ago, I would have been devastated by this takeover attempt. I would have fought you with everything I had, because I thought this company was my identity, my worth, my legacy. Marcus turned back to face the room. But you know what I learned, Richard. A man's true worth isn't measured by the size of his company or the number in his bank account. It's measured by the people who trust him, who depend on him, who choose to love him despite his flaws. The boardroom doors opened again, and Detective Rodriguez entered with 2 FBI agents, just as Marcus had arranged. Richard Blackstone, Detective Rodriguez announced, her voice carrying the weight of federal authority. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, corporate espionage, conspiracy to kidnap, and violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. As the FBI agents approached Blackstone, Marcus continued addressing the board. Ladies and gentlemen, the Swiss firm that Mr. Blackstone hired has agreed to return all stolen assets and information in exchange for reduced sentences for their operatives. The $43 million will be returned to my accounts within 72 hours, along with documentation of every client Blackstone intended to steal and every proprietary strategy they copied. Robert Chen looked stunned, his voice shaky as he asked, Marcus, if this is all true, then the company is secure? More than secure, Marcus said, pulling out another folder. We now have detailed intelligence on our competitors' strategies for the past 3 years. We know exactly which clients they've been targeting and how. We have copies of their bid proposals, their pricing strategies, their acquisition plans. Wellington Industries is about to become the most dominant firm in the Pacific Northwest. As Blackstone was led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence and threatening lawsuits, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying for 15 years. There's one more thing, Marcus said as the room began to settle. I want to announce that I'm restructuring my role in this company. I'll remain as chairman and majority shareholder, but I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations to focus on my family. Robert, if you're willing, I'd like you to take over as CEO. Robert Chen's eyes widened. Marcus, are you sure? This company is your life's work. No, Robert, this company was my life's work. Now I have a life worth working for. 3 hours later, Marcus walked into the safe house to find Claire and Aria waiting for him with anxious faces. Claire was pacing near the window, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, still wearing the simple blue dress she'd chosen for their courthouse wedding earlier that week. Aria was curled up on the couch with a children's book, but her blue eyes were fixed on the door, waiting for him. Daddy Marcus! Aria ran to him immediately, throwing her small arms around his waist. Are the bad men gone forever now? Marcus picked her up and spun her around, breathing in the sweet scent of the strawberry shampoo Claire used for Aria's hair. Forever and ever, sweetheart. We're safe, we're together, and we're going to stay that way. Claire approached with tears in her eyes, and Marcus pulled her into their family embrace. She felt so right in his arms, like she'd always belonged there. Is it really over? She whispered against his shoulder. It's really over, Marcus confirmed, holding both of his girls tight. Blackstone is in custody. The money will be returned, and the company is stronger than ever. But most importantly, he set Arya down and knelt to her level, pulling out an official-looking document. Most importantly, I got a call from Sister Maria this afternoon. The judge approved our petition, and all the paperwork is finalized. Arya Elizabeth Peterson, would you like to become Arya Elizabeth Wellington? Arya's face scrunched up in confusion, then broke into the brightest smile Marcus had ever seen. But I thought when you and Mommy Claire get married for real in the big wedding, I'd be Arya Morrison Wellington. Claire laughed through her tears, kneeling beside Marcus. Actually, sweetie, I think I'd like to be Claire Wellington too. The courthouse wedding was legal, but we're planning the big celebration for our friends and family. And no matter what, we'll all have the same name. So, we'll all have the same last name? Arya asked hopefully, her small hands touching both their faces. All the same name, all the same family, forever, Marcus confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. Arya threw her arms around both of them. This is the best ending ever. Can we have pancakes tomorrow to celebrate? We can have pancakes every day if you want, Claire said, laughing. Not every day, Arya said seriously. Sister Maria says too many pancakes will make your tummy hurt, but maybe on special days? Every day with our family is a special day, Marcus said, and he meant it completely. 2 months later, Marcus stood in the garden behind St. Catherine's Children's Home, watching Claire walk down a simple aisle lined with folding chairs and decorated with wildflowers that the children had picked that morning. She wore a modest white dress that she'd found at a vintage shop in Pike Place Market, and she had never looked more beautiful. The dress was simple but elegant, with lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that caught the summer breeze. Her hair was styled in loose waves, with a few wildflowers tucked behind her ear, Arya's idea. Arya walked ahead of her as Flower Girl, wearing a pink dress that matched the wildflowers and carrying a basket of rose petals that she scattered with serious concentration. Every few steps, she would look back at Marcus and beam, her joy so infectious that the entire gathering couldn't help but smile. The guest list was small but meaningful. All the children from St. Catherine's sat in the first few rows, along with Sister Maria, Detective Rodriguez, Robert Chen, and a handful of Marcus's most trusted employees. Claire's friend Sarah from the hospital was there as maid of honor, and even Mrs. Patricia from the grocery store deli counter had come to see her little Arya become part of a real family. Sister Maria performed the ceremony, her voice warm and full of affection for all three of them. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today not just to witness the union of Marcus and Claire, but to celebrate the creation of a family built on love, sacrifice, and second chances. As Marcus and Claire exchanged the vows they'd written themselves, he thought about how wrong he'd been about success for so many years. Success wasn't a number in a bank account, or a title on a business card, or a penthouse view of the city. Success was watching Arya help Claire get ready that morning, carefully placing each wildflower in her hair. Success was the way Claire hummed while making breakfast, bringing music and warmth to their small apartment. Success was coming home every night to people who were genuinely happy to see him, not because of what he could do for them, but because of who he was when he was with them. Marcus, Claire said, her voice clear and strong as she recited her vows, when I met you, I was convinced I was broken, that I would never have the family I'd always dreamed of. You showed me that sometimes we have to lose everything we thought we wanted to find everything we actually need. You didn't just give me love. You gave me the courage to believe I deserved it. Marcus felt tears threatening as he spoke his own vows. Claire, you saved my life in ways you'll never know. When my card was declined that night, I thought I was losing everything that mattered. I had no idea I was actually about to find it. You taught me that real strength isn't about having all the answers or controlling every outcome. It's about choosing love over fear every single day, even when it's scary. He looked down at Arya, who was standing beside them holding their rings on a small pillow. And Arya, my brave, beautiful daughter, you taught me that the most important job in the world isn't CEO of anything. It's being your dad. You may kiss the bride, Sister Maria announced with a smile that lit up her entire face. As Marcus kissed his wife for the first time as husband and wife, with their daughter cheering beside them and the children from St. Catherine's applauding in the background, he realized that losing everything had been the greatest gift he'd ever received, because only by losing everything had he been able to find what he actually needed. The reception was held in the children's home cafeteria, transformed with string lights and more wildflowers into something magical. Claire had insisted on a simple celebration: sandwiches, homemade cake, and music from a borrowed stereo system. It was nothing like the elaborate corporate events Marcus was used to, and it was absolutely perfect. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down and they prepared to go home to their little apartment, which felt more luxurious than any penthouse Marcus had ever owned, Arya climbed onto Marcus's lap during the final toast. "Daddy," she whispered, her small hand resting on his chest. "Thank you for keeping your promise." "What promise was that, sweetheart?" "You promised that first night that I'd never have to worry about dinner again, but you gave me so much more than food. You gave me a mommy who braids my hair and sings lullabies. You gave me a daddy who reads me stories and helps me with big words. You gave me a family who loves me even when I'm scared or sad or silly." Marcus hugged his daughter tight, looking across the room at his wife, who was helping serve the last pieces of cake to the other children, her face glowing with happiness. This was his empire now. Not buildings or bank accounts or stock portfolios, but love and laughter and the daily choice to take care of each other. "No, Arya," Marcus whispered back, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me the family. You taught me what it means to love someone more than yourself. You saved me." "We all saved each other," Arya said with that wisdom that continued to amaze him. "That's what real families do." As the evening ended and they walked to their car, a practical Honda that Marcus had bought to replace his fleet of luxury vehicles, Arya fell asleep in Claire's arms while Marcus drove through the quiet Seattle streets toward home. "Are you happy?" Claire asked softly, adjusting Arya's position so she could sleep more comfortably. Marcus looked at his sleeping daughter, at his wife's face illuminated by the streetlights, at the simple gold band on his finger that meant more to him than any corporate award ever had. "I didn't even know what happiness was before," he said quietly. "I thought it was achievement, recognition, having more than everyone else. But this is joy, this is peace, this is everything I never knew I was looking for." And that, Marcus thought as he carried his sleeping daughter up the stairs to their modest apartment while his wife held his hand, was the only kind of success that really mattered.